Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. It's my great pleasure to be chairing this panel, Sharing Culture via the Stage. I'd love to start by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the lands on which we gather, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and pay my deepest respects to elders past and present, and extend that respect to all First Nations people in the building today. This always was and always will be a place of storytelling, and it's such an incredible privilege to be talking about that here today with this incredible panel. How are you all? Great, great.
Really good.
I'd love to start this afternoon by asking you each a grounding question, and it really kind of comes from the amazing Jordan Shea's Keynote, What is an Australian Play? I'd love to ask both of you, or all three of you, what do you think that means? What does it mean to have an Australian story, an Australian play? What are kind of the key ingredients for that to be so?
That's a big question. I think for me, it's a multicultural place. And I think any story, any human experience here in this country is an Australian story. Obviously, being First Nations, it depends on, mob who I'm talking to, because yes, I am Australian, I'm an Australian citizen, but first and foremost, before I say anything, I am a Wotjobaluk and Ngarrindjeri person. And so I think, I do grapple with my identity around being Australian and what is an Australian and what is an Australian. There's these massive questions, I guess, that, so for me, an Australian play is just anyone here who is having an experience in life and are willing to share a story or share a yarn. Yeah.
Thanks, Tracy. Jen?
Yeah, we are a multicultural place. I don't think there is a single Australian. I think for me, identity has got many different layers. It's very fragmented. It code switches. It's chaotic. So I think any play that tells a complex and real story about somebody that's here, and often for me it's about people connecting over difference as well is really important to me, I think.
Joanne?
I feel, like Tracy, that really stories that are told by people who inhabit this country, and also are reflective of the country, or have a resonance with the where we live, but are of all of us who actually live here. I think they're Australian stories.
Amazing. I'd like to ask you all another question. In your particular practices as writers, as producers, as facilitators of process around creating story and then sharing those stories with audiences, how do you balance, I guess, the generosity of sharing culture, of sharing particular perspectives with responsibility to the communities that you represent and come from? How do you do that? Like, what does that involve for each of you? And it might vary from project to project.
I'll start, because mine is a little bit different, because I'm not a playwright, so I'm not writing those stories, but I am from a company that works with people from really different backgrounds, and so it's not a diversity company per se, but what I like to call it is that it's inclusive, and I let the playwright guide me, and then I really work hard to build teams around the playwright and make sure that they are grounded and that there are people that they can relate to and have opportunities for discussion. Recently we did the play Yoga Play with LeBoit, and we had a cultural consultant, and after doing that as well we went, this is really great to have someone here who can actually just have an extra ear to identify things, and we're trying to do that moving forward into the future. But basically by providing a really strong scaffolding system to support artists is how we then can work from a place of authenticity.
Amazing. Chen?
Yeah, I guess, yeah, for my play Cut Chili, that was about intercountry adoptees from Sri Lanka, and I'm not an intercountry adoptee, but I was interested in that story because it felt like it would be a good metaphor for assimilation pressures, being a brown kid in a white family, could be like a brown person in a kind of white country. But once I started engaging with adoptees, I learned, that's a very specific experience with a lot of complexity, no access to where you're from. There's a huge amount of grief and loss over your birth family. So I did a whole bunch of interviews and, made sure that I understood that experience, understood that it's not a monolithic experience either. But finding kind of patterns in the psychology, especially complex trauma. And so, yeah, with that complex trauma comes sort of rocky relationships, a lot of people pleasing, a lot of kind of adverse impacts on your relationships. So, yeah, I guess for me, my process would be trying to understand the nuances of the interiority of that story and of the psychology, and then making a complex character that feels real and changes in different contexts, and just honoring that. And yeah, that's probably what guides me. Yeah.
Amazing. Tracy?
You touched on it before a little bit there, Courtney. So I think for me, it depends on the project, and I guess the needs of that project, and if I'm the right person to tell that story, or do I have the authority to tell that story? I kind of look at it like, am I personally connected to that story enough that I'm able to have the authority to share that with audiences? Or is this kind of outside of myself and bigger than me and more involving my mob? And then do I need to engage like cultural authority to oversee the stories and what I'm doing? So it's, yeah, kind of project by project basis, but and my process changes kind of each time depending usually on the story and yeah, how I go about it. But for example, Was and Will Be, because my grandfather shared a lot of culture and told me and my brothers first-hand accounts of things, I felt like, yeah, I do have the authority to share. But I'm working on a project in South Australia at the moment for my father's mob, the Ngarrindjeri, and that's a story where we've got a cultural authority looking over that because it's just bigger than me and outside of me, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Definitely. This question probably is mostly for both you, Tracy, and Chen as writers. What do you do to, I don't know if protect is the right word, but what do you do in your processes? Because so much of you would be, and I think for any creative making stories or making work, you put an element of yourself in your work. But I think when it comes to the particular types of work that you're all interested in, that you want to make, there is an extra element of you that's involved in the content, but also the process and holding space. How do you take care of yourself in that, I guess? Like, that's a big question, because it needs to be repeatable, because you want to be able to do the process and over again. How do you take care of yourself through that?
I roller skate.
Oh, that's yes! I love that.
I roller skate because for me, sometimes I need to get out of my head and into my body. And I live, in the bush, like I live in country Victoria, rural Victoria, and I connect with nature. Like I go for walks by the river. I'm a mum. I play with my daughter and be as silly as possible. So yeah, I do fun stuff, and I try and do things that connect me with country. And yeah, because it's such a responsibility. Like you're not just telling yarns that are about your life or about mob, but you're representing your people up there, like whether it be on stage or the screen. So it's huge responsibility, and one that I don't take lightly at all. But I also feel it kind of arms me with the fact that I'm a voice for my people that were rendered voiceless, who were had nothing. All that they were doing was surviving and trying to get through, life, and try to, because invading forces try to wipe us out, try to wipe our culture out, try to get rid of our language, everything. So everything is, I take it, I take that very seriously, but I try and just do heaps of silly things in my life just to balance it out, because otherwise, you go Barney bananas.
Yeah. I love that. What about you, Chen?
Yeah, I guess that resonates with me. Yeah, I think with writing, if it feels scary, sometimes that's good. You're working through something, and that's going to be interesting work. That's probably going to be useful to somebody. So it's an interesting process where it's okay to. I personally, maybe go hard and deep into things that might be difficult. In the writing process, but then that's not my whole life, so you try to do other things, and I think for me, it can get a bit difficult putting a lot of pressure on yourself to tell the right story or make a strong cultural statement, but I think one of the things that I do to protect myself now is just embrace that I'm a second generation Australian. I never grew up in Sri Lanka, and I don't know Tamil as a language, but that kind of disconnection, that loss, that longing, but also maybe the illusion of what that might solve for you is itself like a worthy cultural statement or perspective. Like, so kind of leaning into my limitations and accepting that, I think it has helped me. Yeah.
And what about you, Joanne? I think that, being in a cultural institution, how do you take care of yourself while ushering lots of new works from various perspectives to the stage?
I think, first of all, and I think this morning the panel actually alluded to burnout, and I feel that it's really important to have a life outside the arts, and be it something we were just discussing backstage about. I was nervous about something, so I danced, and it's really good to do that. And Michelle before was talking about, she was told that she needed to have a weekend and to actually have those days. I think they're really important things to do. In terms of content, when I first started, because I came to the theatre later, and when I first started, I was in awe of how First Nations people actually were looking after each other and protecting each other when they were telling stories. And I actually went, why doesn't everyone else do that? Right? So I've tried to build that into the way that we operate, and that if it's difficult or subject or it's traumatic, that there's outlets for people to be able to speak. I haven't always got it right, and in hindsight now, I've looked at things and I went, oh my God, how could I have done that and not given that person like much more support? But I think it's a learning process, and I think I'm really conscious of it now, that it's really important to look after artists.
Always. I've got a couple of questions for you specifically. Chen, I'll start with you. Your plays often explore diaspora digital life and how communities narrate themselves. How do you feel like your cultural lineage helps to shape the way you approach telling stories for the stage?
Yeah, as a second generation Australian, so I was born in Perth. My parents are Sri Lankan Tamil migrants. Um, yeah, so, so much of growing up in Australia is, trying to make your identity legible to other people and yourself. Like, who am I? Where do I fit? And that's the kind of narration process going on in your mind, and you can get attached to ideas of who you are supposed to be, and yeah, I think that people are actually very fluid, and I don't being diaspora means that there are aspects of culture you have access to, there's aspects you don't. There are times when it's activated, there's times when it's not. Yeah, but identity is much bigger than culture too. Like, it's many things. So I guess the point I'm making is, I'm interested in how that process of narration that we do, and that like need and striving for a clear order to our identity, how that can be sometimes stifling, and how that can maybe create disconnection, and maybe that can stop you from knowing what's really healthy for you, and what you really want, and what you need in a moment, I guess. Yeah. So.
You're such an incredible writer, and I think that one of your biggest strengths is the way that you use humor in your writing to be able to break open particular conversations, all different types of conversations. Is that something that you do consciously? Like, how have you found that strength?
Yeah, I feel. Thank you very much. That's a huge compliment coming from you. But yeah, I just always try to be funny when I write. Yeah, probably a sickness. Yeah, I mean, that's the kind of like dopamine hit, I guess, that you get that kind of keeps you going. Like, it's like hitting a bullseye, and it encourages you along. But yeah, my family's very funny and chaotic and unboundary, like, invasive and messy, and like, and that feels like it's part of culture in a way, a very collectivist kind of culture. And so I guess that's always in the work too. So even if I'm, yeah, writing, it doesn't matter, what ethnicity I'm writing, often that kind of seeps into the work, that kind of banter, that wit, that overlap, that talking. And and I think in a way that is honoring my culture without maybe literally doing it, just in the rhythm of the way people talk. But yeah, humor is a really effective way to disarm people and go into tricky topics and make people feel like they're not being lectured about something. And comedy, yeah, it's a good way to like kind of also fool people and get their defenses down, and then you suddenly gut punch them with something, very true and real and vulnerable. So, yeah, and I think that people who write funny stuff should also think about like why are they so attached to writing funny stuff. Often it's a defense mechanism and an avoidance of saying something directly and vulnerably. So it's good to put that in your work too. If your characters are funny, like why are they being funny? They could be avoiding something. So yeah, that's kind of my approach.
You do it brilliantly. So, Joanne, at the National Theatre of Parramatta, you've produced an extraordinary range of culturally diverse works. You have really done so much for historically marginalised communities in the work that you do. How do you navigate the responsibility of producing someone else's culture on stage?
What specifically do you mean? As in a different cultural group? Is
Maybe
that
from yours, I guess. Yeah,
from
your personal.
my personal? I
Because obviously that's the lens that we view the
Yeah,
world through,
yeah,
isn't it?
okay. So I didn't consciously go out and say I want to put on stories that are from marginalised communities or anything like that. I actually went, okay, this is Australia. This is where I am creating work. This is what the people look like in the streets around me, and I want to tell stories that actually resonate with the people in this community that I'm working in. And I also am more interested, because I'm fourth generation, I'm also interested in really great stories, and they don't have to be about this is how I came to be like this. So they can be, stories about, recurring theme here, but, be about a beauty queen. They could be about a family drama. And it just happens that the people who are writing them come from specific backgrounds. And so it's like that, what is it, that very focused, but it's global. So the stories that I have put on our stages, I don't think that they're, I personally hadn't thought they were anything except really great stories, and that they should be accepted as really great stories written by people who just might come from different backgrounds, and what they have, their essence, is actually infused within that, and they're part of the fabric of Australian society.
Yeah, agreed. You mentioned before that you came to theatre late, but you had been working in music, hadn't you? You've been working
Yes.
across jazz and contemporary music. And so I'm keen to know if if you feel like there's similarities in the way that underrepresented cultures were engaged with in those spaces, or whether there's major differences, or it's only something you've become aware of since you've moved into the theatre
Well,
space.
I have to say this is really sad to say, because in theatre we think that, maybe we're not doing as well as we could. But I have to say, in areas like jazz, there's really, the programs and things are very limited, and even in big classical music, major performing arts organisations, some people think that the idea of diversity is putting a person of colour on the board, or choosing the one person that is known by everyone to be on their board, or to be that one person that is their composer. And I think that that lens of actually widening the pool and making more opportunities is really important. And I think that that comes about through changing the people who have decision-making power and control.
Yes. Tracy, as a writer and director, amongst many other things, you've worked across film, theatre, and TV. How do you navigate telling stories for both community and broader audiences?
Yeah, that's thanks, Courtney. It's a great question. No, I'm just joking. I think first and foremost, I'm like a bit of a greedy gut, so I think about myself and the story that I would like to tell, and then I think about my audience, which is my mob usually, and then how I can best, I guess, represent. How do I want to represent my people on stage, screen, whatever, and then how create interesting stories, complex characters, but then how can I weave in universal themes so I can make it accessible to wider audiences. So I think that's kind of what's going on in my mind, but also there's other things going on in the back of my mind, because I'm all about, I guess I'm at the point in my career where I'm all about creating opportunities for others and creating pathways for others and building capacity. So it's not just, okay, telling a yarn with biggest mob of blackfellas in it. It's, okay, like I want to upskill other people to come and be part of the industry, because I think the only way that we're going to have a really rich industry is to create opportunities for as many diverse people as possible. So I've got all of these things kind of at play when I am telling a story. It's it is the story itself. It's about employment, opportunities for mob, but it's also what's going on in the background, and yeah, so all of that. But you know, you've got to create characters that people can fall in love with, that they can relate to, a relatable character. You've got to tell stories that have impact and meaning, and you know, have comedy, allow audiences to access and engage. So I just love storytelling, and I'll, you know, hopefully tell it till the day I die. But each project is different, and like I said before, and it just depends on the story itself. But I just have all of these kind of things at play, I guess, when I am creating. And you know, you've always got to. We're all human beings on the planet, and you know, we all want to connect, and we all want to feel like we belong. And I think, stories are something that, I mean, storytelling for me even is, it's not just something that's outside of culture. Like, stories are culture, because if you think about like our culture traditionally, stories are the foundations of our very law, customs and society, and song lines and dreaming, like everything revolves around storytelling. Like, you can't separate the two. Like, it's,
Yeah,
like that.
absolutely. You've also worked in such varying different scales. You've worked on intimate projects and really large scale films. Have you found that the scale of the project changes or affects the responsibility you have to a cultural community? How does it change? Does it affect it in any way?
No, I don't think it does, because it's about the story. Like, that's you know, what are the needs? What are the cultural needs, or what are the specific needs of the story? So no, I don't think about, oh yeah, I'm going to write something and it's going to go to the biggest mob of audience. Like, there's no. It's just the story itself, and you could just hope that as many, you know, it can get into as many minds and hearts of people as possible around the world. But no, the scale of it doesn't really come into play at all. Like, when I'm telling a story, it's more about the story itself, and you know, if it's going to connect, and if people want to do it. Like, you know, I think about actors, I'm like, oh God, like, will an actor want to come in and play this part? Like, oh, I could, you know, be creating like the worst character in the world. But, you know, it's, you know, you just, there's all these things, but no, it's not, I don't really factor in the scale of anything when I'm telling a story.
On the larger scale projects that you've worked on, is there any particular support that you felt that those processes have had that you found to be particularly effective for you as a creative?
Like, what do you mean?
Well, I guess has there been any particular support for you as a creative, kind of holding big projects and holding large teams?
Yeah, well, I mean, the project I'm working on with my father's people is, you know, there's such an amazing bunch of humans who are really, who have got my back. Because, you know, you as a storyteller, as a writer, it's one of the most vulnerable, exposing things you could ever do in this world, is to write and for an audience. And but no, we've got like a team of people around us who are ensuring that we're protected, and ensuring that our process is getting checked off by who it needs to be checked off by in terms of cultural authority, and that we're not saying anything in the story that might come back at us in a negative way, and then we're not telling things that we shouldn't be telling, because, you know, it's a story for me. It's about women's business, and it's about a certain songline, and, you know, you just got to make sure. I've got people around me to make sure that I'm not stuffing it up, basically. So yeah.
Amazing. For all of you, thinking particularly about emerging artists who are wanting to share their community stories, what advice would you give to them about responsibility, consultation, protecting culture, protecting themselves in the process?
You don't have to do it if you don't want to. Yeah, it's probably me. I mean, I think, and yeah, that's something that, often artists are pressured to tell, especially stories about culture, their culture, where and sometimes they don't actually have access to all the knowledge. And yeah, then it's a lot of rigorous work. And I guess for me it was interviews, but yeah, there's lots of different ways. So, but sometimes yeah, it's okay to kind of step back and not do that work. Or as I kind of mentioned earlier, like with Cut Chili, there was an aspect. It was actually I think you gave the kind of dramaturgical advice to expand the work to Sri Lanka, and that was good. And I did that, but I did it in a more kind of I made it real. Like I sort of wanted to learn like who this character's birth parents are, and I wrote a lot of that stuff. Interviewed my parents, and I liked it, but I hadn't didn't feel like I was getting it in a really nuanced or real naturalistic way. So I let that go and turned it into a more of a dream figure almost. And so that then the character kind of represented a sort of ancestral longing that people have, and therefore it kind of became more metaphorical and authentic to my experience. So yeah, I guess that would be an example of kind of just really paying attention to who you are, and that your experience is inherently part of a culture, and therefore valid, and you can just tell that story. Yeah.
I think that's such important advice, particularly for people who are earlier on in their career, is just keep checking in back in with yourself, just as you said, Jen. I think that can be really tricky in a lot of processes. So that's amazing that you have that ability to do that and kept that true to yourself. I think that's really important. What about for you, Joanne? Any advice?
Working on a project at the moment that's actually going to take a lot of people's stories, and it's going to be fictional, but I think it's interesting. When I was speaking to some of the people who are the gatekeepers, they were saying, you had to be careful what you write because you could start, a cultural war inside our community where people might not speak to each other for years if you don't actually handle it properly. So I think it's really important to have respect and to actually be listening to what people are telling you. It is your right to write the story that you want to write, but it is good to just have that respect and to know if you don't follow it, there might be repercussions. It might not be on you, but it might be wider, or it could be on you. You could get backlash on it. But I do think, like what you were saying, that if you're true to yourself and if you actually care, I think that is a really good step to making sure that you don't, that you do the right thing. I don't know.
Yeah, so I guess, you've got to ask yourself the question, is this my story to tell? Do I have the authority to tell this story? If I don't, how can I get that? And how can I get the support to, share stories of culture? And I think, we need more stories told by as many different cultures as possible. I think it just makes for a great, rich, thriving industry of storytelling. But yeah, just make sure you've got the right people around you and you have the right to tell that story. Like I can't tell you how many times people have asked me to write a story about some mob, in NTWA, and it's just like there's no connection for me. Like authenticity is a huge thing in terms of my voice and my stories, and I don't feel I have the right to even tell a story from anywhere else really, except my people, my mother's people, my father's people.
And I love what you were saying earlier about how important well, stories help us understand ourselves. So, like telling them over and over again, how important that is. A big question for all of you. What do you think what do you hope the future of Australian storytelling, theatre, film, TV could look like if we continue to expand on this practice of sharing culture? What are your dreams for that?
Oh, you're looking at me. Um, so, so, I mean, I think it would make the world a lot richer and a lot more understanding. But I do feel that at this point in time, we have gone a little bit backwards in terms of, LGBTQI issues. When I look at trans, it must be, you know, there was a hope and a glimmer, and then now it's a much more challenging place to be working in at the moment. And I actually was recently in Germany, and I think when you're living in a country like Germany and that war is actually on your doorstep, and you can actually see the right wing rising, it makes it more important than ever that we actually, they were saying, it's important. We need to have our voices out there, and we need to be sharing stories, and we need to be able, trying to shift people's viewpoints so that they're not so extreme and damaging. And I think it's a really important time in the world where actually creativity, the arts, and the stories that we tell are really, really important to, steer the world into a safer place.
Yeah, I think yeah, just the future of Australian writing. Yeah, I guess it's just important for young people, artists, to just really be listening to themselves, but feel like they can connect with a zeitgeist if and be able to write about the moment. And I think, and I said young people because obviously there's a lot of challenges with that, with technology. I think kind of stifling people's connection to themselves, their subconscious, what's around them. There's kind of like these phones and algorithms hijacking their attention and kind of, putting a little dome over the kind of connection to, what creative insights might be up there. Just to get a bit woo-woo for a second, but I don't know if I'm making sense, so what's my point? I think it was that people, I just hope that people, young writers can really connect with themselves and not be pushed into situations where they're commodifying aspects of their identity and culture, which is also not going to strengthen their voice and also going to mean that they are neglecting what's going on right now, because there are so many pressing, urgent issues, and we're in such a new time of change, and it's so important for artists to kind of document what's going on. And especially with regards to the environment and technology, and this very complex globalized world, and the fragmenting of communities and our sense of reality. It's just so important for, I think, people to write stories about what's going on and also help people connect over difference as we become more and more kind of disconnected. Yeah.
Yeah.
Long-winded, but I think there's
No, I
something in
think
that.
I think that's a great dream. Tracy?
Oh, look, I just hope that, I just think, stories make the world go around, and I just hope that, people just keep wanting to tell stories, and that audiences still want to go and engage and learn and listen to stories. And, you know, I hope for me, like personally, one day that I'm writing plays or I'm telling stories that are fully in language, because like right now I'm on this journey of connecting with our Werakaya language and also Ngarrindjeri, and I'm just wanting to incorporate that as much as I can in stories. And I just, you know, hope that one day, you know, that we're just telling stories in our languages and, you know, reviving and reclaiming and all of that. So, yeah.
Absolutely. Another question for you before we head to our Q&A section of our panel. When were you at a crossroads in your career, and what was the thing that kept you in the sector?
Can I? Okay. Okay. So I made a documentary. That was my first ever foray from theatre, because I started off as a playwright, transitioned to screen. I made a documentary, and that was amazing. But that year, I lost my grandfather, and then I lost my uncle. So my grandfather and my uncle were like substitute fathers for me, because I lost my dad when I was 4. I was just like, I'm out, can't do it anymore. So I thought, yeah, I was out. But then what I discovered as I was just living life, you know, working in packing sheds and just kind of, you know, doing a thing, that art and writing for me is healing. I need to do it. I need to express myself that way, because that's how I actually can heal myself, and I can cope with grief, and I can cope with, you know, racism. I can cope with discrimination. I can cope with the state of the world, you know. So I thought I was leaving the arts, but no, it was like singing and calling me back, and it's because it's healing for me, and I did get back into it about 6 or so years later, but I needed that break.
Amazing. That's great.
Yeah, I think for me, yeah, it's always good to see your work interpreted by actors. Suddenly, I think, you know, that suddenly revitalizes it for me, and like just the freedom sometimes of doing something small and cheap and independently. I think has helped me. Where, you know, if you might have something in development for ages, nothing might happen. But when I've had a little side project here and written a quick play, and, you know, maybe even teched my own show, and then, you know, there's only 20 people there to watch it or something, but like just having that little square space that you've got to just share whatever wild story you have, and that being enough. And yeah, that's usually what keeps me going. Yeah.
That's great.
I think that because we love what we do, that it's really easy to let it consume us and for it to take over, you know, quite a lot of our lives. And I've certainly been at that point where I've gone, I'm exhausted. You know, this is like a lot. And I actually then went on my inward journey that I needed to look at how do I look after myself, you know, that whole put on your own oxygen mask first concept. And I think, yeah, I've made changes to my approach and sort of, haven't taken 2 days a week off, but I definitely have at least 1 day, and actually have made conscious efforts to, you know, engage with the world, because actually by engaging with the world, you actually come up with ideas. Like one of the projects I'm working on at the moment was because I was going to a beginner's dance class. So, yeah, and you know, right. And I think, you know, being curious about the world, being open, being engaged is a really great place for creativity to happen. And I genuinely believe in the power of the arts. And when people say, hey, we're not saving people's lives, I don't actually agree, because I do know of those people who have gone, I've seen myself, I saw that, it gave me hope. I didn't know that there were other people that I could connect to. And I think that we should all embrace being part of an amazing community.
Oh, yes. I love all of that. We might open up to some questions. I think we've got a question here. Joanne and Courtney, what do you want to see result from a creative development? That's a great question. Joanne, go ahead. You go first.
I don't know if I want to jump right in. A creative, I just want to let the artist who is leading the creative development actually find what they needed to find from a creative development. And actually, the way we work at National Theatre of Parramatta, we don't do this for every single thing, but we're handing power back to artists and allowing artists to run creative develop. You know, we did a creative development the other day, but it was actually a community night. So we had some music, we had a reading of a work in development, and we had a Q&A, and we flipped it where the writer actually was asking the audience what they thought. And I think that power should go back to creatives. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think when I sit in a creative development as a director and or story developer or dramaturg, I think for me what I found most valuable, and it's something I only really kind of discovered partway into my practice as a director and story developer, is moving the thing just to see if the ideas in the blueprint, the script, and just like how they might translate to living and breathing on stage. I think when you're working in a theatrical context, I think sometimes, it's generally a week, maybe a little bit more if you're lucky. But if you never get the opportunity to actually throw some ideas up on the floor without the pressure of being inside a rehearsal process and knowing that you've got tech week screaming down the barrel at you, it's kind of the only opportunity you have as a group of collaborators to pressure test stuff in as free a way as possible, I think. So I like to make sure that that's part of the creative development process. Tracy and Chen, as writers, what do you find the most valuable inside a creative development?
It's collaborating with other people. Like, I love theatre because I get to collaborate with other people and other minds, whereas in film, it's just me, usually at my laptop by myself, and, just got no friends. But I love people, and I just love being around, and I love actors, and I just love being around creative people and just, bouncing ideas off each other and, yeah, kind of all, dreaming up whatever story that we're trying to tell together. That's what I love about it, connecting.
Yeah, 100%. The collaboration, the conversations, working with actors, having them, interpret the work, them facilitating new places it can go, cracking it open with conversation or improvisation or strange exercises. I think that in the past, maybe with creative developments, I've felt too focused on a particular outcome, like there's a reading, or like there's somebody watching and like they may fund it or whatever. And I just feel like it always gets in the way. I think more and more I'm embracing going in maybe with less and really just being open to discovery, using that as a place for creativity as opposed to like trying to rehearse something.
I actually think the model of a 5-day in a creative development with a showing at the end is not conducive to the best art, because,
All of Thursday is spent preparing for the reading.
correct. And then the poor playwright, you're in the room all the day and then you have to go home and write.
Yeah,
And then you're cooked by the time you come to Friday.
Yeah.
So I feel that we need to look at different ways to do things. Yeah.
Yeah, agreed. Who are your biggest inspirations in storytelling, locally and or internationally? And who brings you hope in the industry or sector? Who'd like to start with that one? Big inspirations. Who do you look up to?
See, I don't know if I have like just one. I don't know if I can pinpoint just one because I'm inspired by lots of different diverse voices and lots of different storytellers. But if I had to pick just one person in my life, it would be my grandfather, because he instilled in me a love of storytelling that I guess I wasn't aware of at the time as a child. But, he not just told me stories, but he taught me culture. He taught me about connection to country. And yeah, I'm just forever grateful for that. He's always around me. Yeah.
Amazing. Jen?
Yeah, I'm just thinking about what I'm watching at the moment. I'm rewatching The Wire, so it's yeah, yeah, and I think that's quite a feat of storytelling because it's a document of a whole city, and it goes into the complexities of the war on drugs from many different angles, whether it's drug addicts and drug dealers, police, the law, politicians, right? And I just think, that's the rigor of that process, and the kind of interviewing they did, and also engaging with the local Baltimore community and having real people kind of telling their stories is quite inspiring. And I think also the capacity to which you can empathize with those characters who you judge from a distance. And I think what is great about it is it doesn't try too hard to tell and explain backstory. You just meet a drug addict like Bubbles in that show, and you don't know why, but you just know there's a lot of pain there, and you love that person and you feel for them. And I think that's really good writing when you don't have to explain, but you're so specific and with it that it's a person that you can just connect with and love. Yeah.
Amazing. What about for you, Joanne?
Um, so many inspirations. Hard to sort of say, but I'm going to say a really inspiring person is Mina Marita. So she's a director, and she is now working for Woolly Mammoth in Washington. But her practice in terms of making theatre is so inclusive and clear and wonderful. We worked with her, and one of the actors who's, been working in the industry for so many years just went, I've never been in a room that was so wonderful. So I think that's really inspiring to know that actually you can create theatre in a really wonderful way that actually holds space for people and they all feel heard. I think that's really good. And I was just in Darwin and I saw this incredible First Nations movie. It's called Crown and Country, and it is one of the most generous things I have ever seen. It's they filmed its video on country, and they're hoping to make it wider, but it was actually for generations. And I don't know what mob it was, but honestly, everyone who saw it was just blown away because the elder who was leading the project had actually gifted sharing of knowledge. And that was just so powerful and so special. So I'm hoping that that is going to go further and further because it's a beautiful and inspiring and a healing community building work.
And just to pick up on the last part of that question, are there any artists that bring you hope currently? Like, is there anyone is there anyone that anyone on the panel wants to shout out?
Well, yeah, I think Shakti's work in canning and cracking is pretty special because as a Sri Lankan Tamil, that's the first time I've personally experienced healing happen in a theatre because it's so fresh, the Civil War, and the ability to hold both Tamil and Sinhalese who have very different narratives and are very polarized and are very fragile around their narratives being questioned. Being able to hold a space for both and have their feelings towards each other soften was pretty remarkable, and I think something that really it's something that really needs to be explored, as we live in a world that, with wars and a lot of polarization. Yeah.
Beautiful.
I've got to say, Brodie Murray and Tom Molyneux. Like I guess because I live in the country, so I don't get to see as much theatre as I would love to, because I have to travel 4 hours either to go to Melbourne or Adelaide. But collaborating with those lads on Was and Will Be was just phenomenal, and I got to witness firsthand their work, their artistry, their talent, and I swell with pride just knowing that theatre, especially First Nations theatre, is in good hands with young lads like that. Like, they made old girl proud. Yeah.
That's beautiful. What about you, Joanne?
I'm going to say Terrell Alvin McCraney, because as a playwright, he's making really interesting work, but he's also an incredibly generous human, and he's now running a theatre and a theatre company and being able to spread those works. Azan Ahmed, who you probably will never have heard of yet, but I've just uncovered him and we're putting on one of his plays later this year, but he's going to be on fire, because he's an actor, playwright, spoken word poet, amazing insights. And just, like a small hero for me is someone like Darren Yap, who has just kept on going and has been generous and kind and created great art, and is now of the generation where he's giving back to the community as well.
Agreed. How can we start making safety and access a shared responsibility as an industry and a collective, not just being held by one person? It's a really good question. Who'd like to
I
start?
think we're going that way. I just think we're just automatically kind of doing that, and I think that's probably the way of that theatre, the future of theatre making and processes around that is going to be. And I know, like, I've worked on projects where it's just part of it, but maybe there needs to be some kind of national collective thing in policies around process and protocols around that support for writers and for theatre makers.
Yeah, I agree. And making time to have those conversations. I think if you're bringing artists into a space, making sure you're making time prior to that first day to ask, what do you need to be able to do your best work? Like, what kind of things might we need to consider to be able to prioritise that, before kind of getting into the process and then trying to retrofit the process without all that information up front. What do Jen and
I don't
Joanne
think
have?
this is really my domain of expertise. I think I'll hand over to you, actually. Yeah.
I think it's true, that it's actually starting to seep in, because our budget lines look really different from what they did 10 years ago, because, you actually have the cultural and the safety people in there, and then we try and squeeze more out of our budgets. But I think more people are moving towards that as a best practice, and it's good that it's actually on the agenda, that people are aware of it.
I agree. Well, thank you all so, so very much. Can you please all join me in thanking the amazing Tracy Rigney, Chentaranaran and Joanne Key for joining me this evening.